Hello, students. Let's get started with our week 3 grind video. We have two different PowerPoint lessons here that we will go over quickly together. So first, let's talk about qualitative interviews. Qualitative, of course, being a type of data. Qualitative, using words, and quantitative data is using numbers. So if you've taken a survey and been asked, how much did you like this company, or would you recommend this company? Yes or no, or on a scale of 1 to 10, those are numbers, and that is quantitative data. So we are looking at qualitative data, and that is analyzing the words that people say. Now, how do we do this? Well, we can do this through written surveys, and we can do this through interviews, which is what we're learning to do. So let's talk about planning and designing our interview. Now, remember, in gathering data, there's two types of data. You'll use both in this next paper. So first, primary research. You're the actual researcher doing the research yourself. So one way to do that is through interviews. And then secondary research. This is when you're using the research that someone else has done in your work to support your work, such as articles, periodicals, things like that. Now, moving on, in the Spence method, he recommends having a position and purpose. So thinking about what we want this audience to know about our subject, and also what action do we want them to take. Remember, this is decision-oriented communication. So here we have an example of what yours might be. My purpose: this HR professional is looking for information about our employees. And so maybe my position is, my interview with so-and-so suggests several important topics that our company should consider as top priorities to address over the next year. Then you're going to use your secondary resources to support the decision of which priorities that you're recommending. Now, in planning your interview, you're doing an interview guide this week. So remember to ask context questions about the business. Avoid yes or no questions, because that doesn't give you rich qualitative data to analyze. Of course, your questions need to kind of tie back to what you're looking for, but you want to start with nice, simple questions and then move into questions that involve more detail. Now, remember, you should not lead your interviewee, so you are not looking to prove yourself. Should go in open-minded, just figuring out and learning about their business and what they do. So do not go in with the idea that you want to prove something. Now, in composing your interview template or your interview guide, this is your script that you are going to write out. So when you get to your interview, you're ready to go, you're organized, polished, and prepared. So here are some materials that you may want to include. This is more thorough for different types of research. For example, the last point: name any benefit they may receive or any risk. So ethically, when we conduct a research, this is something that we include, but it typically is for more involved research than this type of interview that we're doing today. So if you think about, doing medical research, you can certainly understand why you would need to include something like this. But for ours, you don't need to worry about that. Okay, so we're going to move on. Here are some other reminders about conducting the script here. When you move on to conducting your interview, make sure that you are engaging your interview. You might give scope to express their opinions and their experience. And you can use prompts to keep the conversation going, like, what happened next? Tell me more. Remember your nonverbal communication, so using your eye contact, make it look like you're enjoying yourself, and hopefully you are enjoying learning about this business. But somebody who's just going through the process and kind of sitting back with their arms crossed doesn't feel engaged, and you're not going to get as much data from an interview with like that. All right, so afterwards, you're going to transcribe that data. As I mentioned, you're going to start looking for themes, that is, recurring concepts that they talked about. And there we go. That's something we usually do in class, where they kind of pair up and start talking about their questions. All right, so let's move on to our second lesson for the week, our notes here: critical thinking. So this you can definitely read through. It's a thorough lesson that has lots of notes for you. And this covers the textbook that we took a look at in week 1 or week 2. If this is chapter 3 of the book. So remember, the critical thinking piece that we're learning this week is specifically just a framework, right? So it's a particular way that we can think about different problems so that we go through a process and aren't just jumping to conclusions. We are, well, as it says, using this framework so that we have a specific process and so that our decision is consistent, of high standard, and of course, aligned with our organization's principles, values, and goals. So the first step is getting clarity. This is the most important step of lessons of critical thinking because it really helps us define what the problem is. So as you saw last week when you were discussing the copier problem, well, you probably said, oh, well, we don't really know. Why are people unhappy with the printers? Are they too slow? Is the demand too much? Do they just keep breaking down? Like, what is the issue? So that is why we really need to get clarity, because if we just start jumping to assumptions like, oh, there's too much demand, then we're buying extra machines. Maybe that's not the problem at all. Maybe it's actually very low demand, but the machines are just frequently, clogged, paper jam, whatever it is. So that's why it's important to get clarity, and we want to be as specific as possible. Next, the textbook calls the second step making conclusions. For me, that word feels a little confusing, but he uses it synonymously with the word options, right? So drawing conclusions to me means you're creating all of your options, thinking of the options. What conclusion can you come to? These are the solutions. All right, and then finally, that leads us to the third step, which, as we know, we are working on decision-oriented writing. So this helps you have a framework to go through these steps as you're writing your paper and making an ultimate recommendation. So hopefully now you can see how these pieces are all coming together. So our final step is actually deciding. And when we have done a thorough job of looking and getting clarity, creating those options, looking at different options, that helps that decision-making process move forward more quickly. So here we have getting clarity, what the heck is the problem, drawing the conclusions, looking for possible solutions, and making a decision. Of course, make a decision. Now, you're thinking, well, okay, sometimes this seems very simple, but honestly, if you were to ask, how do you think critically, you probably wouldn't have thought of all of those steps. But why would we go through the critical thinking process? First, our automatic thinking, our fast thinking, it doesn't always give us the time to get much clarity on the problem or to think through all the different solutions. Now, sometimes we skip getting clarity because we are doing things. We want to cross things off the list. And we don't always just take time to think. And you'll find some interesting information about Google here and how they really get their employees to spend time just thinking. We want to cross things off our list, and so we might skip getting clarity. Now, if we don't do this first step, as we saw with a recopier problem, you might be solving the wrong problem altogether, and we don't want to waste our time, money, and effort. All right, folks, that's it for the grind video this week. And I've enjoyed reading all of your work. And if you have any questions, of course, shoot me an email or make an appointment. I had an appointment with a couple of students, and it's been really nice to get to know you guys a little bit more. So I'm always open to meeting with students if you have questions. Have a great week. Bye.